I knew the moment I saw Brenda Carmichael's perfectly manicured hand knocking on my door that my peaceful morning was about to go straight to hell. My name is Lawson, and I had just finished my second cup of coffee when the insistent rapping started. I lived in Whispering Pines, a relatively new housing development outside of Casper, Wyoming, where the wind howled across the plains like a freight train and winter storms could dump 3 feet of snow overnight. The development was only 5 years old, built on what used to be empty ranchland, and the homes were these massive cookie-cutter McMansions that all looked like they belonged in a suburb of Denver rather than the high plains of Wyoming. I opened the door to find Brenda standing there with her clipboard, her blonde highlights catching the November sun, her lips pressed into that tight line that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. She was the president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association, a position she took as seriously as a 4-star general commanding troops. "Aaron," she said, not bothering with pleasantries, "we need to talk about that eyesore you installed along your property line." I knew exactly what she meant. 2 days ago, I had put up a snow fence along the western edge of my property. It was a simple wooden slat fence, about 4 feet tall, designed to catch blowing snow before it could pile up against my house and garage. Anyone who had lived in Wyoming for more than one winter knew exactly why snow fences were essential. The wind would pick up snow and carry it for miles, depositing massive drifts wherever there was an obstruction. Without a snow fence positioned properly, you could wake up to find your entire first floor buried under a mountain of white. "It is a snow fence, Brenda," I said, keeping my voice level. "It is November. Winter is coming." "It is a violation of Section 7, Paragraph 4 of the HOA covenants," she said, tapping her pen against her clipboard. "No fences may be erected without prior approval from the Architectural Review Committee. You did not submit the proper forms, did not wait for approval, and frankly, that thing looks like something from a farm. This is a residential community, not a ranch." I felt my jaw tighten. "Brenda, this is Wyoming. Snow fences are not decorative, they are functional. Without it, I will have 10-foot drifts against my garage door by January." "Then you should have thought about that before you moved into a community with standards," she said. "I am giving you 48 hours to remove it, or the HOA will fine you $200 per day until it is gone." "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious. The rules exist for a reason, Aaron. If we let everyone just put up whatever structures they want, this neighborhood would look like a junkyard." She handed me a formal violation notice, already printed and ready. 48 hours. She turned on her heel and walked back to her massive Escalade, which was parked in my driveway like she owned the place. I stood there holding the notice, feeling the cold November wind bite through my flannel shirt. The sky was already turning gray in the west, which meant snow was coming. The Weather Service had been predicting a hard winter, possibly one of the worst in decades. I went back inside and called my real estate attorney, Mark Chen, who had helped me with the closing when I bought the house 2 years ago. "They cannot force you to remove a snow fence," Mark said after I explained the situation. "Wyoming state law actually protects property owners' rights to install necessary structures for weather protection. The HOA covenants cannot supersede state law." "So what do I do?" "Write them a formal response citing the relevant statute. I will email you the exact wording. Reference Wyoming Statute 3421-112, which specifically addresses homeowner rights regarding weather protection measures. Tell them you are not removing the fence, and if they fine you, you will see them in court." I thanked him and hung up. Then I spent the next hour crafting a response letter that was professional but firm. I printed it out, put put it in an envelope, and drove over to Brenda's house, which was 3 streets away and looked like something out of a luxury magazine. All stone and glass and landscaping that must have cost more than my truck. I dropped the letter in her mailbox and drove home, feeling like I had won the first round. That feeling lasted exactly 2 days. The next violation notice arrived by certified mail. This one informed me that I was being fined $200 per day starting immediately, and that if I did not remove the fence within 7 days, the HOA would enter my property and remove it themselves, billing me for the cost. I called Mark again. "They are bluffing," he said. "They cannot legally enter your property without your permission or a court order. Just sit tight. Let them rack up their imaginary fines. When they try to collect, we will take them to court and get the whole thing thrown out." But Brenda was not done. Over the next week, I received 3 more notices, each one escalating the threats. Then she started calling the other homeowners, telling them that I was violating community standards and that my snow fence was going to lower everyone's property values. Soon, I started getting dirty looks from neighbors when I checked my mail. Someone left a note on my truck windshield that said, "Follow the rules or leave." The first major snowstorm hit in mid-December. It was everything the Weather Service had predicted and more. The snow started falling on a Tuesday afternoon, light at first, then heavier as the wind picked up. By evening, it was a full-blown blizzard. The wind howled at 40 miles per hour, driving the snow horizontally across the plains. Visibility dropped to 0. The entire town of Casper shut down. I sat in my living room, warm and comfortable, watching the storm through my window. My snow fence was doing exactly what it was supposed to do. The blowing snow hit the fence and dropped to the ground, forming a neat drift about 30 feet from my house. My driveway was relatively clear, protected by the fence. My garage door was accessible. Everything was working perfectly. The next morning, I woke up to 3 feet of fresh snow and brilliant sunshine. I pulled on my boots and coat and went outside to survey the damage. My property looked good. The snow fence had created a barrier drift that had caught most of the blowing snow. I would need to shovel my driveway, but it was manageable. Then I walked to the end of my driveway and looked down the street. It was carnage. The houses along my street, all of them without snow fences, had massive drifts piled against their garages and front doors. Some of the drifts were 6 or 7 feet tall, completely blocking access. I could see neighbors already outside with snow blowers and shovels, fighting a losing battle against the mountains of snow. Brenda's house was 3 streets over, but I decided to take a walk. The main roads had been plowed, but the sidewalks were buried. I trudged through the snow, my breath coming out in white clouds. When I got to Brenda's street, I stopped and stared. Her house was absolutely buried. The western side, which faced the prevailing wind, had a drift that reached almost to the second-floor windows. Her 3-car garage was completely inaccessible, with snow piled at least 8 feet high against the doors. Her husband's Mercedes was parked in the driveway, nearly invisible under the snow. She was outside with a shovel, wearing a designer parka that looked like it had never seen actual work, making almost no progress against the massive wall of white. I should have felt bad for her. Instead, I felt a grim satisfaction. Over the next few days, the neighborhood slowly dug itself out. The city plows worked overtime, and people hired services to haul away the excess snow. Brenda's house took nearly a week to fully excavate. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had to pay over $2,000 to a snow removal company to clear her property. Meanwhile, my driveway took me about 45 minutes to clear with a snow blower. I thought that might be the end of it. I thought Brenda might realize that snow fences existed for a reason, that maybe the HOA rules needed to be adjusted to account for practical reality. I was wrong. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the first Thursday in January. I had never attended one before, but I received a personal notice from Brenda stating that my violations would be discussed and that my presence was strongly encouraged. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a fancy building with a gym and a pool that I had never used because the HOA fees were already insane. When I arrived, there were about 30 people there, sitting in folding chairs arranged in rows facing a table where Brenda and 4 other board members sat. I recognized a few faces. There was Tom Henderson, a retired Air Force colonel who lived 2 doors down from me. There was Janet Walker, a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids who always waved when she drove by. And there was Richard Sterling, a lawyer who owned the biggest house in the development and drove a different luxury car every season. Brenda called the meeting to order with a sharp rap of her gavel. She went through the usual business first, approving minutes from the last meeting, discussing landscaping contracts for the common areas, debating whether to allow Christmas lights after January 15th. Then she got to the item I knew was coming. Item 7, she said, her voice taking on a harder edge. Violation of architectural standards by Aaron Lawson, 2847 Meadowbrook Drive. All eyes turned to me. Mr. Lawson erected an unauthorized fence on his property in November, despite being explicitly told that he needed architectural approval. He has refused multiple requests to remove it, and has refused to pay the accumulated fines, which now total $8,400. There was a murmur in the room. $8,400. That was $200 per day for 42 days, Mr. Lawson, Brenda said, looking directly at me. Would you like to explain yourself? I stood up, feeling every eye in the room on me. It is a snow fence. It is a standard weather protection measure. Wyoming state law protects my right to install necessary structures for weather protection. This is not about state law, Brenda said. This is about community standards. This is about all of us agreeing to maintain a certain aesthetic quality. Your fence looks cheap and ruins the visual harmony of the neighborhood. It kept my house from being buried under 8 feet of snow, I said. How did that work out for everyone else? That got a reaction. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Tom Henderson actually nodded. But Richard Sterling spoke up. The aesthetic standards are what maintain our property values. If we let people put up whatever structures they want, this place will look like a trailer park. I am with Brenda on this. The fence needs to go. I am not removing it, I said flatly. Brenda's face hardened. Then the HOA will pursue legal action to collect the fines and force removal. We will put a lien on your property if necessary. Try it, I said. My attorney is ready. The meeting ended badly. I left feeling angry and frustrated, but I also noticed something interesting. Several people approached me afterward in the parking lot. Tom Henderson was the first. That snow fence saved your bacon during that storm, he said quietly. I spent 6 hours digging out my garage. I am thinking about putting one up myself. Janet Walker came over next. Brenda is on a power trip. Everyone knows it. She just likes controlling people. I am sorry you are dealing with this. Even Richard Sterling, who had sided with Brenda during the meeting, stopped me as I was getting into my truck. Look, between you and me, you are probably right about the fence, but Brenda is my wife's best friend, so I have to back her up in public. Just wanted you to know. I drove home feeling slightly better, but I knew this was far from over. The legal notice arrived 2 weeks later. The HOA was suing me for the fines and seeking an injunction to force me to remove the snow fence. Mark Chen filed our response, and we were scheduled for a hearing in late February. Meanwhile, the winter got worse. Storm after storm rolled across the plains, each one dumping more snow and creating more massive drifts. My snow fence continued to work perfectly. The rest of the neighborhood continued to suffer. By late January, something interesting started happening. Tom Henderson put up his own snow fence. Then Janet Walker did too. Within 2 weeks, 7 other houses in the development had installed snow fences. Brenda lost her mind. She sent out a mass email to the entire neighborhood, threatening everyone who had installed unauthorized fences with the same fines I was facing. She called the local news and tried to get them to do a story about how property owners were ruining a beautiful neighborhood. She even called the city zoning office to see if snow fences violated any municipal codes. Nothing worked. The city told her snow fences were legal and encouraged. The news stations ignored her, and the homeowners with new snow fences told her, politely but firmly, to pound sand. The court hearing was on a Thursday in late February. Mark and I drove to the Natrona County Courthouse in Casper, a solid brick building downtown. Brenda was there with the HOA's attorney, a slick-looking guy named Preston Vance, who wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Margaret Thornton, who had a reputation for being no-nonsense and practical. She listened to Preston Vance explain the HOA's position, talking about covenants and community standards and aesthetic harmony. Then she listened to Mark explain state law and property rights and weather protection. When both sides had finished, Judge Thornton leaned back in her chair and looked at Brenda. "Mrs. Carmichael," she said, "do you have a snow fence on your property?" "No, Your Honor," Brenda said. "It would be unsightly." "How much did you spend on snow removal after the December storm?" Brenda hesitated. "About $2,000. "And Mr. Lawson," the judge said, turning to me, "how much did you spend?" "Nothing, Your Honor. I cleared my own driveway in about 45 minutes. Judge Thornton nodded slowly. "I grew up in Wyoming. I have lived here my entire life. Snow fences are common sense. They have been used on ranches and farms for over 100 years. The fact that this HOA is trying to ban them is, frankly, absurd." Preston Vance tried to interrupt. "Your Honor, the issue is not the functionality. It is the covenant violations. The covenant violations do not matter," Judge Thornton said sharply. Wyoming Statute 3421-112 is clear. Homeowners have the right to install necessary weather protection structures. The HOA covenants cannot supersede state law. Case dismissed. Mr. Lawson owes nothing, and the HOA is prohibited from interfering with his snow fence or any other snow fence installed by other homeowners. She banged her gavel, and it was over. I walked out of the courthouse feeling vindicated. Brenda stormed past me without a word, her face red with anger. But Brenda was not the type to accept defeat gracefully. 2 weeks later, I came home from work to find my snow fence destroyed. Someone had taken a chainsaw to it, cutting through the wooden slats and fence posts. The whole thing was lying in pieces on the ground. I called the sheriff's office immediately. Deputy Martinez showed up within 20 minutes, took photos, and filed a report. Then I called Mark. "This is criminal destruction of property," Mark said. "If you have any proof who did it, we can press charges." I did not have proof, but I had a strong suspicion. I went to my neighbor across the street, an older man named Bill Cooper, who was retired and spent most of his day watching the neighborhood from his living room window. "Bill," I said, "did you see anyone near my property today?" He nodded slowly. "Saw Brenda's husband, Gary, over there around noon. He was carrying something, looked like tools maybe. Thought it was odd, but figured maybe you had hired him for something." That was enough for me. I told Deputy Martinez, who went to talk to Gary Carmichael. Gary denied everything at first, but when the deputy mentioned that his truck had probably been caught on traffic cameras on my street, Gary's story started to fall apart. Eventually, he admitted it. Brenda had sent him over to destroy the fence. She figured if it was gone, I would not bother rebuilding it, and even if I did, they could just keep destroying it until I gave up. Deputy Martinez arrested Gary for criminal mischief and destruction of property. Because the damage exceeded $500, it was a felony in Wyoming. That should have been the end of Brenda's reign as HOA president, but she doubled down. At the next HOA meeting, she actually tried to defend what Gary had done, claiming he was standing up for community standards. That was when Tom Henderson stood up and said, "Brenda, you are out of control. I am calling for a vote of no confidence." The vote was not even close. Brenda was removed as HOA president by a margin of 27-3. Tom was elected as the new president, and one of his first acts was to formally amend the HOA covenants to allow snow fences. But the legal system was not done with the Carmichaels yet. Gary's criminal case went to trial in April. The evidence was overwhelming. Bill Cooper testified about seeing him at my property. The deputy testified about Gary's confession. I presented receipts showing the cost of the original fence and the cost to rebuild it, which totaled just over $1,200. The jury found Gary guilty in less than an hour. The judge sentenced him to 60 days in jail, suspended pending completion of 200 hours of community service, and ordered him to pay me restitution for the fence plus an additional $1,000 for my time and inconvenience. But here is where things took an interesting turn. During the investigation into Gary's vandalism, the sheriff's office had obtained a warrant to search his computer and phone records, looking for any communications with Brenda about the planned destruction. What they found was much worse. For the past 3 years, Brenda and Gary had been running a kickback scheme with the landscaping company that maintained the common areas. The HOA was paying the landscaping company nearly twice the market rate for services, and the company was kicking back 30% to the Carmichaels through a shell company they had set up. The total amount embezzled was over $90,000. The county prosecutor charged them both with theft, fraud, and conspiracy. The case was fairly straightforward once the financial records were subpoenaed. Brenda tried to claim she had no idea the payments were improper, but emails showed she had been actively involved in setting up the scheme. The trial was in July, and it was the talk of Whispering Pines. Everyone who had been paying inflated HOA fees for years wanted justice. The prosecution laid out the evidence methodically. Bank records, emails, testimony from the landscaping company owner who had agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. The jury found them both guilty on all counts. Brenda was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Gary got 4 years because he also had the vandalism conviction. They were both ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, which meant liquidating their assets, including their massive house. The house sold in August for $800,000. A young couple from Colorado bought it, and one of the first things they did was install a snow fence. As for me, I rebuilt my fence and reinforced it with steel posts this time. When the first big storm of the next winter hit in November, I sat in my living room with a hot cup of coffee and watched the snow pile up harmlessly against my barrier, protecting my home just like it was supposed to. Tom Henderson turned out to be a great HOA president. He focused on actual community improvements rather than petty rules enforcement. He renegotiated contracts with service providers and actually reduced our monthly fees. He organized neighborhood barbecues and block parties. The whole atmosphere of Whispering Pines changed. I ran into Janet Walker at the grocery store one Saturday in December. She thanked me for standing up to Brenda. "You have no idea how many people she bullied over the years," Janet said. "She fined someone $500 because their mailbox was the wrong shade of black. She reported another family to child services because their kids' toys were visible in the front yard. She made life miserable for everyone, and we all just went along with it because we did not want to deal with the hassle. You actually fought back, and look what happened." I shrugged. "I just wanted to keep snow away from my garage," she laughed. "Well, you did more than that. You freed us all." The following spring, Tom called me and asked if I would be willing to serve on the Architectural Review Committee. He wanted to reform how the HOA handled approval requests, making the process more reasonable, and focused on legitimate concerns rather than arbitrary aesthetic rules. I agreed, and over the next few months, we completely rewrote the architectural guidelines. We eliminated the ridiculous rules about mailbox colors and Christmas lights. We created clear standards for what needed approval and what did not. We explicitly allowed snow fences, satellite dishes, solar panels, and other practical improvements that some people had been afraid to install. The transformation was remarkable. People started actually improving their properties instead of living in fear of HOA violations. Gardens appeared. Play structures went up in backyards. One guy installed a basketball hoop in his driveway, which would have been forbidden under Brenda's regime. Property values, ironically, went up. Turns out people were willing to pay more to live in a neighborhood where the HOA was not insane. I also got to know my neighbors better. Tom and I started having coffee every Sunday morning, talking about military history and Wyoming weather. Janet's kids started coming over to pet my dog, a golden retriever named Buck that I had adopted from the shelter. Even Richard Sterling, who had initially sided with Brenda, apologized and admitted he should have stood up to her earlier. "My wife was friends with Brenda," he explained. "They played tennis together, went to the same salon. My wife defended her for the longest time, said she was just trying to maintain standards. When the embezzlement came out, my wife was devastated. She felt like an idiot for not seeing it." The legal aftermath of the Carmichael case dragged on for months. The HOA had to hire a forensic accountant to trace all the fraudulent payments. The landscaping company owner who had participated in the scheme lost his business and did 6 months in jail. The HOA recovered about $60,000 of the stolen money through asset seizures and restitution payments. Tom used that recovered money to fund real improvements. Better playground equipment in the common area, new benches and picnic tables, updated lighting on the walking paths. He actually asked homeowners what they wanted instead of just dictating decisions. The next winter was even harder than the previous one. We got hit with storm after storm, and the snow just kept piling up. But this time, over half the houses in Whispering Pines had snow fences. The neighborhood looked different than it had when it was first built, but it was functional. People could get to work. Garages were accessible. Emergency vehicles could reach homes if needed. I drove past the Carmichael house one morning after a particularly brutal blizzard. The new owners had not only installed a snow fence, they had planted a row of evergreen trees along their western property line as a secondary windbreak. Their driveway was clear. Their house was protected. They had learned from what happened before. I thought about Brenda sometimes, sitting in prison, probably still convinced she had been right, that aesthetic standards were more important than practical reality. I wondered if she had learned anything, or if she was just bitter and angry. The thing is, I did not set out to destroy her life. I just wanted to protect my home. But her obsession with control, her inability to admit she might be wrong, her willingness to break the law to enforce her vision of how things should be, that is what brought her down. In late spring, I was working in my front yard, planting some flowers along the walkway when a car pulled up. A woman I did not recognize got out and walked over. "Are you Aaron Lawson?" she asked. "I am. My name is Patricia Wells. I am the president of the Ridgewood Estates, HOA over in Gillette. I heard about what happened here with your HOA and the snow fences. We are having a similar issue, and I wanted to ask for your advice." I invited her in for coffee, and she explained her situation. Her HOA was trying to ban backyard chicken coops, even though Wyoming state law protected residents' rights to keep a small number of chickens. She had been fighting the board for months and was getting nowhere. I told her everything that had happened with Brenda, the legal arguments we had used, the state statutes that protected homeowner rights. I gave her Mark Chen's contact information. I told her about Judge Thornton's decision and how clear the law was. "The key is knowing your rights and not backing down," I said. "HOAs count on people just giving up because it is easier than fighting. But when the law is on your side, you have to stand your ground." She thanked me profusely and left. 2 months later, she called to tell me they had won. The HOA had backed down after her attorney cited the same statutes we had used, and now several families in her neighborhood had chicken coops. I realized then that what had happened in Whispering Pines was bigger than just snow fences and one corrupt HOA president. It was about standing up to unreasonable authority, about not letting petty bureaucrats control every aspect of your life, about understanding that communities are made up of real people with real needs, not just abstract rules and regulations. Tom Henderson understood that. Under his leadership, the Whispering Pines HOA became something genuinely useful. When the Martinez family's house was damaged by a fire in June, the HOA organized a fundraiser and got them temporary housing. When old Bill Cooper had a heart attack, the HOA set up a meal train and made sure his lawn was mowed while he recovered. When a stretch of fence along the walking path needed repair, Tom organized a volunteer workday instead of just hiring it out, and half the neighborhood showed up with tools and materials. That is what a homeowners association should be, a group of neighbors helping each other, not an enforcement mechanism for arbitrary rules. The summer was beautiful that year. The wildflowers bloomed across the Wyoming plains, and the mountains in the distance were spectacular. I spent my weekends hiking and fishing, enjoying the freedom of living in a place where I could breathe, where I did not have to worry about someone measuring my grass height or checking if my house numbers were the approved font. In August, I got a letter from Brenda. It was forwarded from the county jail where she was serving her sentence. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was handwritten, several pages long. She started by saying she did not expect me to forgive her or even respond. Then she went on to explain, in rambling detail, how she had gotten so caught up in being HOA president that it had become her entire identity. She talked about how her kids had moved away, how Gary was always working, how she felt invisible and unimportant except when she was enforcing rules and telling people what to do. "I convinced myself I was protecting the neighborhood," she wrote. "I convinced myself that standards mattered more than people. I was wrong about everything. By the time I realized it, I had already destroyed so much. I destroyed your fence. I destroyed my marriage. I destroyed my life, all because I could not let go of control." She ended by saying she hoped I was happy and that the neighborhood was doing well. She did not ask for anything, did not make excuses, just acknowledged what she had done. I read the letter twice, then folded it and put it in a drawer. I did not respond. What would I even say? But I thought about it for days afterward. How easy it is to let power corrupt you, even in small ways. How important it is to remember that rules serve people, not the other way around. Fall came early that year. By October, the aspen trees in the mountains were brilliant gold. I took a long weekend and drove up to the Bighorn Mountains with Buck, camping and hiking and enjoying the crisp air. When I came back, Tom told me that 3 more families had moved into the neighborhood, all of them attracted by the reformed HOA and reasonable rules. "We are becoming the model for how HOAs should operate," Tom said. "I've gotten calls from developments in Cheyenne and Laramie asking for copies of our new guidelines." "That is because we focus on what matters," I said. "Keeping common areas maintained, organizing community events, helping neighbors, not measuring people's grass with a ruler." Tom laughed. "Brenda actually did that once. Did you know that? She brought a ruler to the Henderson house and measured their grass in front of them because she thought it was a 1/4 inch too long." I shook my head. "How do we let someone like that have so much power?" "Because most people do not want to deal with HOA drama," Tom said. "They just want to live their lives. And people like Brenda thrive on that apathy. They fill the vacuum because no one else wants the job." That was the real lesson, I thought. Democracy, even the micro-democracy of a homeowners association, only works when people participate. When good people stay silent and let petty tyrants take control, everyone suffers. The first snow came in late October, earlier than usual. Just a light dusting, but it was a reminder that winter was coming again. I checked my snow fence, made sure all the posts were solid, reinforced a couple of connections. Everything was ready. This time, I knew the neighborhood would be ready too. This time, we would not be fighting each other. We would be working together the way neighbors should. November brought the first real storm, and it was a monster. 2 feet of snow in 24 hours with wind gusts over 50 miles per hour. The whole region shut down. Schools closed. Businesses closed. The interstate was impassable. I watched from my window as the snow piled up against my fence, creating that familiar protective drift. My driveway was clear. My garage was accessible. Everything worked exactly as designed. The next morning, I went outside and started clearing my driveway. Tom came over from his house, and we helped each other finish the job. Then we walked down the street, helping some of the older residents who could not handle the heavy snow. Janet Walker's husband joined us, and then Richard Sterling showed up with his snow blower. By noon, we had cleared driveways for 8 different houses. We were all cold and tired, but it felt good. It felt like a real community. That afternoon, Tom organized an impromptu gathering at the clubhouse. Someone brought chili. Someone else brought beer. Kids played in the snow outside while adults warmed up inside. We talked and laughed and told stories about the storm. No one mentioned Brenda. No one talked about the bad old days. We just enjoyed being together, being neighbors who actually liked each other. As winter deepened and more storms came, that pattern continued. We helped each other. We looked out for each other. The HOA sent out helpful information about weather preparedness instead of threatening violation notices. Tom organized a snow removal crew of volunteers who would help elderly or disabled residents after major storms. Whispering Pines was not perfect. No place is. There were still occasional disputes about parking or noise or dogs. But we handled them like adults, talking to each other, finding compromises, treating each other with respect. In February, I got another letter, this one from Patricia Wells in Gillette. She wrote to tell me that their HOA had not only backed down on the chicken coop issue, but the board president who had been pushing the ban had been voted out. The new board was implementing reforms similar to what we had done in Whispering Pines. "You started something bigger than you realize," she wrote. "People all over Wyoming are standing up to unreasonable HOAs. You gave us the courage to fight back." I showed the letter to Tom and he grinned. "Maybe we should start a consulting business. HOA reform specialists." "I think I will stick with my day job," I said. I worked as a civil engineer for an oil and gas company, designing pipelines and infrastructure. It was steady work and paid well, but Tom was not entirely joking. Over the next few months, we got contacted by several other HOAs facing similar issues. Tom started compiling our reformed guidelines into a template that other communities could use. He created a website with resources and information. It became a real grassroots movement. Spring arrived, and with it came the annual HOA elections. Tom ran for re-election as president and won unanimously. I was elected to the board as vice president. Janet Walker became treasurer. We had a functioning, reasonable, adult leadership team. At our first board meeting of the new term, Tom proposed something interesting. "I think we should officially apologize to Aaron," he said, "on behalf of the HOA for everything that happened with Brenda. The harassment, the fines, the vandalism. None of that should have happened, and the HOA as an institution failed him." The board voted unanimously in favor. At the next community meeting, Tom read a formal apology, and the HOA presented me with a check for the original fines Brenda had tried to collect, plus the cost of rebuilding my fence after Gary destroyed it. It totaled nearly $10,000. "You do not have to do this," I said. "Yes, we do," Tom replied. "You stood up for what was right when everyone else was too afraid. You forced us to be better. This is the least we can do." I accepted the check, and the whole room applauded. It was one of the most surreal moments of my life. I used the money to install solar panels on my roof, something else that would have been forbidden under Brenda's regime but was now explicitly allowed. The panels significantly reduced my electric bill and made my home more self-sufficient. Several other neighbors followed suit. Summer was peaceful. The neighborhood thrived. Kids played in the streets. People actually talked to each other instead of hiding in their houses. Block parties became a regular thing. The community pool was busy every day. In July, I got a call from Mark Chen, my attorney. "Brenda is up for parole," he said. "They are having a hearing next month. The parole board is soliciting input from victims. Do you want to make a statement?" I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to tell the parole board to keep her locked up. But another part of me remembered that letter she had written, the honest acknowledgement of what she had done wrong. "Tell them I do not object to her parole," I said finally. "She has served her time. Let her have a chance to rebuild her life." Mark was surprised. "Are you sure?" "After everything she did, I am sure. Keeping her in prison longer is not going to help anyone." The parole hearing was in August. Brenda was granted early release, having served 18 months of her 3-year sentence. She was required to complete her sentence on probation, with community service requirements and regular check-ins with a parole officer. I heard through the grapevine that she and Gary had divorced while they were both in prison. Gary was still locked up, his release date not for another year. Brenda moved to a small apartment in Casper and got a job at a grocery store. I saw her once, about a month after her release. I was shopping for supplies at the hardware store, and she was there with a cart full of cleaning products. She looked older, worn down by what she had been through. She saw me, and for a moment our eyes met. She looked like she wanted to say something, but then just nodded slightly and turned away. I nodded back and continued with my shopping. There was nothing to say. The past was the past. Fall came around again, and with it, the preparation for another Wyoming winter. I checked my snow fence, replaced a couple of boards that had weathered badly, made sure everything was solid. All around the neighborhood, other people were doing the same thing. We had learned our lessons. The first snow fell on Halloween night, just a light dusting that made the jack-o'-lanterns look magical. Kids went trick-or-treating, bundled up in coats over their costumes. I handed out candy and enjoyed seeing the neighborhood so alive and happy. November brought the serious storms. One after another, they rolled across the plains. But we were ready. Every house with a snow fence stood protected. The few houses without them learned quickly, and by December, nearly every property in Whispering Pines had some form of snow protection installed. I stood in my driveway one morning after a particularly brutal blizzard, looking at my snow fence doing its job, the neat drift of captured snow standing between the howling wind and my home. Beyond my property line, I could see the whole neighborhood, all of us with our defenses in place, all of us working together instead of fighting each other. Tom walked over, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one. "Hell of a storm," he said. "They are all hell of a storm in Wyoming," I replied. "Remember when Brenda tried to ban snow fences?" Tom shook his head. "That woman was absolutely crazy." "She was not crazy," I said. "She was just so focused on control that she stopped thinking about reality." It can happen to anyone if they are not careful. Tom sipped his coffee and looked around at the neighborhood. "You know what the property values are now? Up 23% since Brenda left. Turns out people want to live in a place where the HOA is not insane. Who would have thought?" I said dryly. We both laughed. The sun was coming out, turning the snow brilliant white. It was beautiful and harsh and real, exactly like Wyoming should be. That evening, I got an email from Patricia Wells in Gillette. She was putting together a conference for HOA reform advocates from across Wyoming and wanted me to speak. I agreed, figuring I could share what we had learned in Whispering Pines. The conference was in January, held in Cheyenne. About 50 people showed up, representatives from HOAs across the state. I gave a presentation about our experience, about standing up to unreasonable rules, about the legal protections homeowners have, about how to reform an HOA from within. The response was overwhelming. People came up afterward with their own stories of HOA abuse. A man from Sheridan, whose HOA had fined him for parking his work truck in his own driveway. A woman from Rock Springs, whose HOA tried to ban her from flying an American flag. A couple from Jackson, whose HOA had foreclosed on their home over $300 in disputed fines. I listened to all of them and realized how widespread the problem was. HOAs across the country were being used as weapons by petty tyrants, hurting people and destroying communities in the name of property values and aesthetic standards. But I also saw the solution. When homeowners fought back, when they knew their rights and refused to be bullied, when they took control of their HOAs and implemented reasonable reforms, things got better. Communities thrived. Property values actually went up. People were happier. The conference became an annual event. The next year, over 200 people attended. The movement was growing, spreading beyond Wyoming to other states. People were waking up to the fact that HOAs were supposed to serve homeowners, not rule over them. Meanwhile, life in Whispering Pines continued peacefully. Tom remained HOA president, and under his leadership, the association focused on practical improvements and community building. We repaved the walking paths. We installed better lighting in the common areas. We organized regular community events that actually brought people together. My snow fence stood sentinel through every winter storm, doing the job it was designed to do. No one ever challenged it again. In fact, when new homeowners moved into the neighborhood, one of the first things they were advised to do was install their own snow fence. It became a symbol of the neighborhood, a reminder that common sense and practical reality mattered more than arbitrary rules. 3 years after the original confrontation with Brenda, I was working in my garage on a Saturday afternoon when a car pulled into my driveway. A young couple got out looking nervous. "Are you Aaron Lawson?" the man asked. "I am. My name is David Chen. This is my wife, Lisa. We just bought a house in a new development outside Laramie. The HOA there is trying to ban solar panels, even though we already have them installed. We heard about what you did here, and we wanted to ask for advice." I invited them in, made coffee, and told them the whole story. I gave them Mark Chen's contact information, explained the relevant state statutes, told them about how to organize other homeowners and fight back against unreasonable HOA rules. They left with hope in their eyes and determination in their voices. That became a regular occurrence. Every few months, someone would show up at my door, having heard about the Whispering Pines HOA war, looking for guidance in their own fight. I helped them all. I shared what I had learned. I connected them with resources and attorneys and other homeowners who had successfully reformed their HOAs. It felt good, knowing that something positive had come from that difficult experience. Brenda had tried to bury me under the weight of her petty tyranny, but instead, I had helped start a movement that was liberating homeowners across the region. The years passed. Winters came and went, each one bringing its storms, each one proving again and again that snow fences were not just useful but essential. My original fence weathered and aged, and I replaced sections as needed, always keeping it functional and strong. Tom Henderson eventually stepped down as HOA president after 6 years of excellent service. Janet Walker took over, bringing her own style of practical, compassionate leadership. The reforms we had implemented became so ingrained in the community culture that no one even questioned them anymore. They were just the way things were done. I ran into Brenda one more time, 5 years after she had been released from prison. I was having lunch at a diner in Casper, and she was working there as a waitress. She came to my table to take my order, and recognition flashed in her eyes. "Aaron," she said quietly, "Brenda." There was an awkward pause. Then she said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For not objecting to my parole. I found out later that you could have made a statement, could have asked them to keep me locked up longer. But you did not. That meant something." I nodded. "Everyone deserves a second chance." "I am sorry," she said, "for everything I put you through, for being so blind and so stupid. I destroyed a lot of lives, including my own. I think about it every day." "I hope you have found some peace," I said. "I am working on it," she replied. "That is all I can do." She took my order and walked away. I never saw her again after that, but I heard later that she moved to Montana and started over there, working at a small nonprofit helping formerly incarcerated people reintegrate into society. Maybe she found redemption in helping others avoid her mistakes. I hope so. As for me, I continued living in Whispering Pines, enjoying the community we had built, the friendships I had made, the peaceful life I had carved out on the Wyoming plains. Every winter, my snow fence stood strong, protecting my home from the storms that raged across the landscape. And every spring, when the snow melted and the prairie came alive with wildflowers, I was reminded of how important it is to stand up for what is right, to not let petty tyrants control your life, to fight for common sense and practical reality over arbitrary rules and regulations. The snow fence was never just about keeping snow away from my garage. It was about refusing to surrender my independence and common sense to an organization that had lost sight of its purpose. It was about standing firm when everyone else wanted me to just give in. It was about proving that one person, armed with the law and the courage to fight, could make a difference. The drifts had buried their expensive homes deep, just as the title of this story suggests. But more than that, their own arrogance and corruption had buried them even deeper. And from those ruins, we had built something better, something stronger, something that would last long after the snows melted and the seasons changed. I looked out my window at my snow fence, weathered but sturdy, standing guard over my property. Beyond it, I could see the whole neighborhood, a community of people who had learned to work together, to respect each other, to value common sense over petty rules. That was my victory. Not just protecting my home from winter storms, but helping to create a place where people could live freely, without fear of harassment from power-hungry bureaucrats. A place where neighbors helped each other instead of reporting each other. A place where an HOA served its community instead of ruling over it. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming snow. Another storm was on the way, another test of our defenses. But I was not worried. My snow fence was ready. My neighbors were ready. We had learned our lessons well. And somewhere out there in developments and neighborhoods across Wyoming and beyond, other homeowners were learning the same lessons, standing up to their own Brendas, reforming their own HOAs, reclaiming their own freedoms. That was worth fighting for. That was worth every moment of stress and conflict and uncertainty. Because in the end, we had not just protected our homes from snow. We had protected our rights, our dignity, and our sense of community from something far more dangerous. Unchecked authority wielded by small-minded tyrants who cared more about control than about people. The snow began to fall as evening approached, light at first, then heavier. I settled into my favorite chair with a book and a cup of tea, listening to the wind howl outside, knowing that my home was protected, my neighborhood was safe, and we had all emerged stronger from the battles we had fought. That is how this story ends, not with dramatic confrontation or Pyrrhic victory, but with quiet satisfaction and hard-won peace. Sometimes the best endings are the ones where you simply get to live your life on your own terms, where common sense prevails over bureaucratic nonsense, where communities thrive because good people refuse to let bad people ruin everything. My snow fence stood in the gathering darkness, doing exactly what it was designed to do, while inside my warm home, I reflected on everything that had happened and everything we had accomplished. The Whispering Pines HOA war was over, and we had won not just a battle, but the whole war. We had taken back our community, reformed our association, and created something genuinely worth protecting. And when spring came again, as it always does in Wyoming, the snow would melt and the cycle would begin anew. But we would be ready, always ready, because we had learned the most important lesson of all: vigilance is the price of freedom, even in something as mundane as a homeowners association. The moment you stop paying attention, the moment you let the wrong people take control, that is when tyranny creeps in. But not here. Not anymore. Not in Whispering Pines, where a simple snow fence had sparked a revolution and changed everything for the better. The drifts could come, the storms could rage, but we would stand firm, protected by our common sense and our collective determination to never again surrender our freedom to anyone who thought their petty rules mattered more than our lived reality.